Hey, Friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And welcome back to Going In Raw Countout with all the talk lately of AEW's creative woes in terms of them not really telling the kind of stories they used to. We thought it'd be maybe productive, constructive to go back in time and take a look at the stories that AEW told over the past couple of years since their inception, because that's only been the past couple of years. The stories that actually resonated, stories that had like maybe some twists and turns or interesting approaches, things that we kind of feel they've gone away from. And maybe if we provide some examples of stuff, then like, you know, people be like, oh yeah, why don't they do that kind of stuff anymore? So yeah, your AEW's top 10 stories. That's what we're going at today, Larson, on Count Out.
Let me ask you a question before we get started here.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of overall philosophy, some themes, some motifs, some common elements that were going through some of these stories that you feel like AEW, just in generalities, nothing, you don't have to talk specifics, that you think AEW, Tony Khan, would benefit from looking into further.
One
that was obvious to me is in several of these stories, what you see is not just this is the story. For example, MJF and CM Punk.
Yeah, right.
That's just not the only story involving some of the principles in that story. Parallel to that story, we have another one we're going to talk about during here, and while they nail the landing, MJF and Wardlow. Those stories were going in parallel. Stories would cross over.
Yeah.
People feuding in various stories would cross over. That would happen a lot more than it has in recent months.
You know what's funny is that I think you had mentioned this maybe in the last count out when we were talking about things that they could fix with AEW. And by the way, we're going back to WrestleMania season next week. We're going to do the worst WrestleMania builds.
Probably it's going to happen.
But we felt like, you know, a celebration of what AEW has done right, I think was probably in order after last week's telling them what to do. Something that was interesting, and I understand that just by virtue of the timeline, much of what they did was during pandemic, at the Daily's Place era. Yeah. But it did feel like maybe the lack of crowds was something trying to overcome that. They got a bit more, I don't know, interested in character motivation, mystery. And when I say mystery, I mean MJF invades the Inner Circle. What is his motivation? Is it actually to rule side by side with Chris Jericho? Eventually, I remember being surprised. He had already put together his own faction on the side, and that was it. So to me, it has to do with character motivation. What is it? What does this person want? What is he going after? Too often now I feel like it's surface. It's out. There's no mystery behind it. The motivation is clear from the get-go. And I think the best stories, people want to know, okay, what is this guy up to? Because that keeps you tuning in for the next week. What is he going to do next? And will that provide further clues as to what they're going to do from there?
Indeed. Yes. Good point. Good point. Let's dig in. Let's get started, Steve.
All right. Let's start off with number 10. Miro versus God. Now this doesn't. Go ahead. Go ahead. You're Miro's number one fan, so go ahead.
So I watched some of the promos that he did, not just during his TNT title reign and after. And once Miro split off from Kip Sabian after being introduced as the best man, he came off as kind of a comedic character, but there was always something lurking there that you knew, okay, this isn't Miro's final form in AEW. Sure enough, he split from Kip. He debuted the Redeemer character, and shortly thereafter, he won the TNT title from Darby Allin. After Darby had kind of burned himself out, defending the title over and over and over and over again. And at the time, it was this title I present to you, God.
Yeah.
And because I have this title, that means I am your chosen one. I am your favorite champion.
Yeah. Right.
And before every match, he would present the title to the heavens. And he dropped these incredible promos talking about redeeming people. His flexible wife.
The juxtaposition of the sexual and the spiritual was thick with Miro. It was highly entertaining.
It was wildly entertaining. It was wildly creative. It was something different.
It was, yeah.
You know, we don't, so often in wrestling, we get these character archetypes that are just kind of maybe slightly altered or slightly repackaged. This was something, the Redeemer Miro was something we maybe never see in the world of wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's a weird parallel, but this also, and here's the thing about this particular story is that unfortunately we never really got, maybe we will one day, but we never got whatever payoff might have been, might Miro have thought of. Oh, look at that. Look at what a great friend I am. A little piece of artwork there I did for you.
Glorious piece of artwork. I love this line. Have I not given your name enough praise? You gave me a body of granite and a neck of sand. Is that some kind of joke?
Is that some kind? I watched that promo researching this, and yeah, I don't even know what kind of payoff this character could have with his feud with God. And admittedly, this is here at number 10 because it really doesn't. It's not like a matches based thing. This is going to be a weird analogy, but this is sort of like the closest AEW has gotten to somewhat of a Bray Wyatt type character, where the matches seem to be not quite as important at as what happens like in between the matches. His motivation is not external, it's internal, external to him because of the presence of God, his belief in God. But beyond that, his motivation isn't in feuds or rivalries with wrestlers. They are a means to an end to please God or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after he loses the title, he feels like God is displeased with him, but he wonders why, because look at all of the destruction I caused for you, God.
Yeah.
Is that not enough? And now, not only did he lose his TNT title, apparently, to a degree, he lost his wife.
Yeah.
Because he said, I can't come home to her without the title.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, it really is a bummer that we never got to see this story kind of follow through, because he had a series of great promos after dropping the TNT title to Sammy, which is a mistake. He should have never lost that title to Sammy.
Yeah.
He got hurt. He had a bad hamstring. He was out for a while.
Yeah.
Came back, put in the All-Atlantic title scene, and it was like, okay, here we go. Here's your avenue.
Made sense.
To put another title on him. And you could continue the story between him and God in a slightly different vein, where it's like, okay, you're pleased with me, but I'm still got a chip on my shoulder for you making me lose this title, the other title to begin with. And they didn't do it. And they seem like they're going to go to a feud with Malachi, the pagans, as Miro called them.
Yeah.
And then House of Black took their leave, and we haven't seen Miro since.
All right, let's move ahead with number 9.
9.
Mox versus Kenny Omega. So this dates back to the first AEW pay-per-view, Double or Nothing. We're at the end of the main event, I believe, was Mox Jericho, right?
No, it was Kenny Jericho.
Sorry, Kenny Jericho. Mox debuted and attacked Kenny Omega, and we got sort of like, it was interesting because to watch the promos to the build to their first match. It was very much like Mox comes in and Kenny was referencing people from where you come from, meaning ex-WWE guys, which is sort of a point of contention with a lot of AEW fans and the conversation around AEW, the concept of the former WWE employee. And of course, we got some absolutely killer matches between these two. Of course, their first one was at...
It was a lights out match. That was the actual first match.
Yeah, and it was unsanctioned, and they did that great bit. I remember you mentioned this the other day when we were talking about doing fantastic. This. Was, back then AEW would be a bit more clever in the way they told their story. So like Tony Khan has never wanted to be. He showed up on screen a couple times, but he's never wanted to really be like an in storyline type character like Bischoff was, for example, or Vince. And this is one time when he sort of broke that rule, but he appeared behind closed doors in audio only, where Mox goes and he's demanding a match with Kenny. And you hear Tony Khan say, look, this has to be an unsanctioned match. You could do this lights out because we can't take responsibility for what's going to happen to you guys. And he was like, what? Like, wins and losses, my win over him isn't going to matter. Like, that's bullshit. So there was a lot of good storyline stuff here. building up to that first match, the lights out match.
Yeah. After Mox debuted, they were supposed to have the match initially at All Out.
Yeah.
And then Mox had the infection in his elbow, had to have surgery on it, so he couldn't make it. Pac filled in for Mox against Kenny. And then Mox made his re-debut, if you will, on the first episode of Dynamite.
Where he put Kenny through that glass table.
The coffee table, I know.
Yeah.
That was a vicious spot with the paradigm shift. And it was really our first look at Jon Moxley rather than Dean Ambrose.
Yeah, right.
How are these characters going to be different? Answer: a lot different. If anybody was familiar with Moxley's work prior to WWE and CZW and whatnot, it gave you a better idea what he was about as opposed to anything he did at WWE.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
The level of violence, of physicality, and that lights out match, man, holy cow.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. It was
glass,
crazy.
The giant hunk of chain.
The weird barbed wire, it was almost like a barbed wire bed.
Yeah.
Like a giant barbed wire bed. Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. Of course, Mox won that one. And then they sort of, their paths sort of took a different turn. Of course, Omega went and did all the stuff with Hangman being a tag team champion. When that fell apart, Omega ended up, becoming number one contender. Meanwhile, Moxley moved on and became world champion. And we got, heel Kenny Omega. That match at Winter is Coming ended up being, sort of the beginning of the belt collector, Kenny Omega, who was completely over the top.
Yeah.
And so they had that Winter is Coming match. That's where Kenny won the title. Cheated to win with the microphone and Don Callis. And so we had it's funny because as we got like all the different phases of Kenny Omega as a character with his long-lasting feud with Mox, leaving it and coming back to it. But Mox sort of was the same throughout, which was kind of interesting. Again, when you're dealing with characters and how they can change during the course of a feud or when a feud is revisited, you sort of look at the same thing with Mox's old Shield guys, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. When they revisit a rivalry, they're much different characters than they were before, but they can play off that history.
Exactly. That's something they've done to great success with Seth and Roman. And of course, after Kenny won the belt, then they had the exploding barbed wire match. Match itself was a lot of fun. The finish, of course, pretty notorious for not going as planned. A couple sparklers going off.
Widely mocked the finish to that match. Pew pew.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there was supposed to be more grandiose that was planned and constructed. It just didn't work. So,
but if it wasn't for that happening, we would never have gotten Kenny Omega saying 69 me Don.
I know.
Because Kingston covered Moxley to save him from the sparklers.
Yeah.
All that.
They tried to kayfabe that the sparklers and stuff, and that
shit was so funny. Making fun of that. Dry humping your friend on the ground. Anyways, Omega lost that, and then they continue to feud like Mox and Ken and Eddie. Got on the same page, and they would continue to feud a little bit here and there. But yeah, it's that kind of thing where, number one, watching this back, you just see how vital Kenny Omega should be to the company, and how he's kind of not right now.
Yeah.
And that's a shame when you see these guys go at it, and that story of, Kenny Omega, the guy who's never been really in WWE, Mox reaching the highest of highs in WWE, and then them coming together makes for some really interesting stuff.
It does. And of course, Kenny had lost his first official AEW match, losing to Jericho. The winner of that match eventually went on to contend for the world title. And then Kenny lost to Pac at All Out too. So this was Kenny coming into AEW on a bit of a losing streak.
Yeah. Which is always interesting because, if you remember that first year or so, the Elite were not afraid to lose and put other people over and spotlight other people. And there was some criticism behind that. So early that next year, they really started picking up with the Young Bucks winning the tag titles and Kenny winning the world title and stuff. So interesting stuff. But yeah, the juxtaposition, the dichotomy of Mox and Kenny has always been an interesting one and had a lot of good stuff going on in it.
Yep, they did. And hats off to Kenny for, he wrestles a physical style, but there's wrestling a physical style and getting, like slammed on a coil of thick chain. That's something else entirely. The glass,
Yeah.
There were some pretty crazy spots in that lights out match.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was a great one. But that first, I remember watching that first Dynamite at the end of it, seeing that Death Rider through the glass was awesome.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Let's move on to number 8.
8.
Cody Rhodes versus Dustin Rhodes. Brothers
Nightmare
going at it.
Natural.
Yeah, so this was the build to. They didn't even have TV at the time. It was the very first pay-per-view. It was Double or Nothing. It was after All In. They had established this company with Tony Khan. And so the build to this was going on in sort of like 2 shows. Well, the build to the pay-per-view was going on 2 shows, being the Elite. And then there was Road to Double or Nothing on the Nightmare Family YouTube channel. And it's really, really, I highly recommend everybody going to look at those old Road 2 episodes, because it's like, QT Marshall wearing like a polo shirt, being Cody's right-hand man. It was before he had the hair transplant. Yeah. So he was balding. He looked like management. And which is great for him, because these days, QT Marshall, say what you will about how they use him, he looks amazing. Like he really did go from, from schlub to winner. But also just watching Cody very seriously build his role as guy who put together AEW, because this outlines everything. He's on a dozen FaceTime calls with the Jackson brothers, with Kenny. He's recruiting people. He's recruiting wrestlers. You see him, call up a Jungle Boy and sign him. And so it takes 13 episodes of this.
14. There's a 14th. I saw a 14th.
No, I was going to say 13 to announce the opponent.
Gotcha.
Or it might have been on the 13th one, they go to the thing, and then on the 14th one, it's announced. But anyways, so he sends it. So there's a big mystery over who Cody's going to fight. And then in the 13th or 14th episode, we finally find out it's Dustin. And you get to just hear, and honestly, it's just built over a couple video promos, really. And again, it just sort of like illustrates character motivation, because Dustin believes that this challenge is coming from his brother within the context of we're family. Cody says, this has to do with me bearing the Attitude Era. They built up so much for us, but then made it impossible for us to improve the game, for us to improve from then on out. Said something about, they built a highway, but set the speed limit at 35 miles an hour. We couldn't go any further, and it killed my peers' generations. And he viewed, obviously, the Gold Dust character, Dustin's character, as sort of the epitome of that. And I think it wasn't Double or Nothing when he smashed the throne.
Yeah, must have been.
I think it was.
Yeah.
With the sledgehammer. And then, they have this absolutely killer match.
That was fantastic.
Just a beautiful, beautiful match. Very bloody. And then we get the big twist at the end where Cody says, I don't need a partner, because he wants to take on the Young Bucks. Yep. I need my brother.
Yep. Yeah.
And then they hug, and there's not a dry in the house.
Nope. Not at all. Not at all. As if Cody has exercised the Attitude Era from his brother.
Yeah.
At the end of the match.
Yeah.
Via all the blood in the ring.
Yeah.
And with that, Dustin is born anew into this current generation of wrestling, and therefore they, as a team, could take on arguably the greatest team of this generation, the Young Bucks.
Yeah.
It's interesting that rather than framing it as, and Cody, the 14th episode of Road 2 is like a 4-minute soliloquy from Cody.
Yeah.
It's like talking about the biblical parable of the prodigal son.
Luke 1:15, I think it was. Yeah.
And there's a video package I remember playing in the MGM Grand before the match, where Cody says, it's not about that. This is a generational battle. This isn't brother versus brother. This is his generation versus mine. And yeah, I mean, it was really, even if you didn't watch the Road to series in advance of the match, if you watched that, I think it's a 1.5-minute video package, it's there.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's simple, but based on the video package and how the match played out, story's right there. The beauty in this story is the simplicity.
Yeah.
Like the match is not overly complicated. There's not a whole lot of showy, flashy spots. Mm-hmm. It's just a really well-constructed, well-told, simple story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And then they go in and they talk. I think they took the loss to the Young Bucks, right? I'm pretty sure they did.
I believe so, yeah.
But yeah, no, it was just like you said, simplicity. That sometimes that's all you need. But the character motivation, as simple as it is, isn't just, hey, I'm better than you. There's a lot of stakes in this for historical context, and then you add the family stuff into it, or even vice versa. Yeah, it's just really good. The thing that I love about this too is that watching, and I think I texted you this shit, watching the Road to, he delivers Dustin in the preceding episode in 13 when it's revealed that it's him. I mean, it's like 6 or 7 minutes of him basically talking and walking around his ranch and talking about, Cody growing up and him growing up. And then Cody gives that 4-minute bit. And then the next episode, it's like Jericho, it breaks into Cody's house and is sitting at his desk, and Cody walks in, and evil Jericho wants a public appreciation for him. Even back then in these little road twos, he's doing silly WWE shit, the same stuff he's doing now.
Yeah.
And it's like Cody was just citing Bible verse, and now, he's got to deal with Jericho wanting people to say thank you to him.
Exactly. Interesting foreshadowing to Cody versus Jericho. Mm-hmm. What that would happen right after Jericho won the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, it kind of interesting in how this type of thing seems to be what Cody Rhodes had envisioned for AEW. I mean, if you watch this, you would think that this is the mastermind behind it all. You watch, the entire series, because it's just him going out recruiting person after person after person. And it does. It makes you wonder, what expectations he had going forward for his own role in AEW, and then what those expectations, how they actually paid off. And seemingly it was in an underwhelming enough way for him to be like, yeah, I'm not. I mean, like I said, if you watch this, it's like he built the damn place, and it's clear he did put a lot of work into it. I don't think they went out and filmed all this stuff as it being fake. They might have staged some of the stuff, but it does seem clear that Cody was involved heavily in the AEW stuff. So kind of interesting to see that now with, 4 or 5 years of, in our
time passing and him not even being with the company anymore.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Let's move on to number 7. MJF invades the Inner Circle. Now, this is the most classic example, I think, that we've gotten to so far on this list of and I know you could call it WWE style of story or whatever, but of wrestling, week to week televised wrestling storytelling.
Mm-hmm. That played out over the course of numerous months. So I believe MJF is fresh off a defeat at the hands of Jon Moxley for the AEW Championship, where MJF pivots and tries to join the Inner Circle. And now at this juncture, MJF has already turned on Cody. More on that in a little bit. He's well established as a heel. Of course, at the same time, the Inner Circle is a heel faction as well.
Yeah.
And MJF makes a plea to Chris Jericho. I want in. I want to be a part of this. I want to learn from you. I want to sit under your learning tree.
And before that, there was a whole lot of teasing between the two of them where they'd be like, well, I think I'd be good in the Inner Circle. Do you think so? Well, I think you'd be good. Do you think it'd be? It was very. They were like, neither one wanted to admit that they wanted MJF in the Inner Circle.
Yeah, exactly. And so a match was set up between MJF and Jericho. If MJF won, he'd be granted entry into the Inner Circle, and sure enough, he won. And the expectation, I think, from at least to my part, maybe a lot of people, was that MJF was going to infiltrate the Inner Circle and pit everybody against Chris Jericho and take it over for himself.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And so when the reveal was, I joined the Inner Circle to destroy it from within because I have my own awesome faction waiting for me to destroy you.
Yeah.
That was an interesting little twist there. You had Sammy Guevara always being suspicious of MJF's motives, always questioning his actions. We got a Stadium Stampede match from this feud. We got the first Blood and Guts match from this feud. And then we had another match between MJF and Chris Jericho, where if Jericho had lost, Jericho would have to retire.
Yeah, right.
Put his career on the line.
Yeah.
And obviously Chris Jericho won that last match, but it was, it was a feud that after the Cody story with MJF really kicked. AEW has actually done a really, really good job taking their time and building up MJF step by step to be where he is now, a credible champion.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this feud with the Inner Circle was just essentially, hey, you're gonna do this, and guess what? Guess what you got next? You got Phil. That's your next major feud.
Yeah.
And that's the one that really established MJF as champion in waiting, pretty much.
Also, we wouldn't have had, if not for this feud, Dinner Debonair.
Yes.
The first musical number that I can remember in modern pro wrestling anyways.
Yeah. A ballsy move.
And it was, if nothing else, it was a ballsy move. And yeah, even the Dinner Debonair thing, it was something different. Not everything is going to pan out, although a lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it. I'm sort of on the fence. Like it is very ballsy. It's really corny and cheesy, but that's the point of it. But it was something very different. And I appreciate that. But the biggest thing I appreciate, I said at the head of the show, was simply, what is MJF going to do? And the tension within the group between, Wardlow and Hager for some good, kind of semi-comedic relief, but also, are these big men going to throw down? All the different members of the Inner Circle, they did a really good job of giving them their own reaction to this outsider coming in who clearly has an ulterior motive, and them not trusting that Jericho was seeing things clearly. That right there, week to week, is compelling storytelling, because there are so many unknowns, because there are so many people and so many motivations and so many insecurities, and nobody knows how they're all going to react. Is Sammy just going to leave? Is he going to get kicked out? There was like the big ultimatum moment. It was just week to week. It was just really interesting stuff. And again, it took place during pandemic, and I always appreciated how Daly's place was set up, so that really the hard cam behind the hard cam was just like the tunnels. They didn't have, you could see when they would go from side to side, you'd see, they'd fill up the wrestlers on the sides. They'd pump in a little bit of a crowd noise, but just enough to make it seem like it was like, not a ton of people there, but they gave reactions. And from a presentation standpoint, it just worked. It did not feel as empty as WWE's product at the time, because you had so many people involved in this stuff. Yeah,
it really did. And even a difference of having the wrestlers sitting ringside.
Oh, yeah.
And doing things.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Betting on matches, drinking. Not just there, in NXT, they had wrestlers or trainees there around the ringside area, and they were just yay.
Yeah, they were just trained to cheer or boo if you're a good guy or a bad guy. Yeah,
but they were doing nothing to establish who these characters are, and at least AEW endeavored to do that while making the venue feel like it was more lively than just an empty amphitheater.
And yeah, it was great, because not only were they, like you said, doing stuff, but like the bad guys would cheer the bad guys, the good guys would cheer the good guys. And so it was a very creative, a very inspired idea to deal with during pandemic. But this was definitely one of the more interesting feuds during that time, one of the more interesting stories during that time.
Indeed.
Let's move on.
Number 6, Steve.
Number 6. Cody and MJF. So the feud that for MJF preceded MJF in the Inner Circle, like you said, was Cody. Now, I think that this feud stemmed from Cody forcing MJF into wearing a Star Trek shirt during his entrance at whatever it was. But of course, Cody had written a stipulation. Was it him versus Jericho?
Yeah, it was him versus Jericho, yeah.
And the stipulation was, of course, if he loses that match, he can't vie for the world title. again, and MJF had his corner, and I'm pretty sure you and I were like, oh yeah, this guy, he's gonna turn on him.
Definitely because the story, like MJF already had a reputation based on his work in the indies, and a little bit that we've seen him in AEW as being a heel, a major one at that.
It's funny too, because even in the going back to the Cody Road 2s, MJF is introduced in one of those episodes, and he's just a piece of shit. He's still just a piece of shit, but he seemed to get along really well with Cody all along the way. And there were so many opportunities for him to prove himself otherwise, and he'd always be on the up and up. Yeah. And so this was the big moment.
Yes.
And of course he throws it. I think he threw in the towel, didn't he?
He threw in the towel while Cody was in the walls of Jericho, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then he gave him a low blow after the match. And Cody was like, oh, crap, I probably shouldn't have written that stipulation in there.
Yeah. And then this was the first time MJF put the barriers in front of someone to get a match with him. Mm-hmm. And it saw MJF give Cody the lashes. It's the cage match against Wardlow where Cody did that crazy moonsault off the top.
I think Cody says he regrets that too.
Yeah, he did say he regrets that.
Yeah.
And he earned his match with MJF, and he put MJF over.
Yeah, MJF won that match. Yeah.
Yeah, the Dynamite Diamond Ring, punched Cody with it.
Yeah.
And it really set MJF off on his path becoming, a major pillar in the company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said, that went a long way towards getting him where he is now. Seemingly everybody understood that MJF should be a made man, because everybody is, like we're going to talk about in a couple entries here. Well, that's a little ways from now, but yeah, including CM Punk, who, took that loss in Chicago against MJF, which was a massive, massive deal.
Yeah.
So let's move on to number 5. Kenny Omega, the belt collector.
This was tons of fun. So, of course, at Winter is Coming, he beat Jon Moxley for the AEW title via cheating. Mm-hmm. And then he proceeded to go to Impact, beat Rich Swann for the Impact World title. He actually had 2 of them. He had the official one and then the one Moose had.
Yeah, the eBay title, yeah.
So he had the 2 of those. He went to AAA, won the Mega Championship. He had all the belts, seemingly. And he was super obnoxious.
Yeah.
He was going to Impact all the time. He was in AAA somewhat regularly. He defended that belt once or twice. I don't even know how many times he defended it.
He had like the crazy Triple H facial hair at various times. He'd wear like the crazy outfits and stuff.
Suits and the expensive shoes. And just doing some incredible promo work as well. And it's unfortunate that I don't know if he entered into his title reigns or he a little kind of beat up a little bit. But I always remember an episode of Impact where he was trying to run out to the ring at the end of the show.
Yeah.
And you could just tell he was in massive amounts of pain. He had a bad shoulder, bad knees. He had a hernia.
Well, we had also speculated, I think appropriately so, or truthfully so, that he was, I remember that spot, and I'm pretty sure they had filmed that the same day after he had already had, who knows? I don't even know who.
Oh, it was probably the day after he had the match against Rich Swann.
Yeah, that could have been. Or honestly, it could have been an hour or 2 after. They might have been like, hey, let's film this stuff now while we can. I don't know. But because it's not like, I don't think they had crowds at the time. But yeah, no, I remember being floored when he won the AEW title, and then Callis says, you'll see us on Tuesday. And me and Enforcer, I think, were watching live at the time.
Yeah.
And because it's like one of the clips on our channel. And he says, Marvez is out there near the limo, the SUV limo. He says, Tuesday, Dynamite's on Wednesday. He says, nope, we'll see you at Impact Wrestling. And we were like, holy shit. That was absolutely nuts.
It was.
Yeah.
And of course, Kenny going to Impact brought us Tony Khan's paid ads.
It brought us paid ads, and it brought us Smash Zone, because we started watching. We started doing the Impact co-streams, and then they stopped doing those on Twitch, and so we were like, well, we got to replace with something. Replace it with Smash Zone.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. The best hour of the week. But yeah, no. And that sort of leads into our number 1 entry, but we'll get to that in 4 more entries. Number 4. Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa. Dude, I really honestly thought with how many different twists and turns there were in this, and how well and how popular Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker both ended up being right after this. And because of this story of theirs, that Tony Khan would recognize the value of like booking his women's division with good stories, good characters, and giving them consistently and giving him tons of time.
Yeah.
And he's sort of, I remember right after Thunder Rosa won the cage match in San Antonio, it was like within weeks, he was already focusing on the TBS championship and Jade Cargill. And Thunder Rosa was completely an afterthought. And I remember being very disappointed by that.
Well, it was the Dynamite after she won the title. I think she had an interview on the stage and was instantly interrupted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But yeah, the kind of origins of this one is, Thunder Rosa, she was the NWA Women's Champion, arrived on Dynamite. She says, I want to put this women's division on the map. And I'm the one to do it.
Yeah. And at the time she was still signed. She was not signed to AEW. They couldn't sign her because she was still with NWA. But it was like, how long is that going to be?
And of course, Britt, she had undergone her own heel turn. And, she considered herself the role model. And I think partially because of that, she thought she should be the face of the women's division in AEW. And so they feuded, had a couple matches, a tag match, which led to the lights out match between the two of them.
Oh man, which was a stellar match.
Which was awesome. A star-making performance for both competitors. There's that iconic image of Britt, blood pouring out down her face, looking at the camera.
Yeah.
And based on both their performances, I mean, like Britt was elevated immensely. Thunder Rosa got the win on Britt after losing to her twice previously in singles matches.
Yeah.
But then they went their separate ways, and Britt up towards the title picture not too long after this, and she claimed the championship. And then they had a match. The story kind of going into their title bout was essentially Thunder Rosa can beat Britt Baker if it's one-on-one.
Yeah.
But the issue was it's never one-on-one with Britt because there's Rebel and there's Jamie Hayter at the time. And so, of course, the pay-per-view match, Rebel, Jamie Hayter get involved. Thunder Rosa loses, and that set up the cage match in San Antonio a couple of weeks later where Thunder Rosa got the win.
Yeah. And I remember her big entrance attire, and it was a really, really just awesome moment. And you really feel like, man, this is the conclusion to a really great story. Where is it going to go from here? And then,
I mean, that's kind of the one of the major issues still with AEW Creative is that they a lot of times craft a really interesting story.
Yeah.
The issue is, what do we do after that?
Right. Where do you go?
How do we take the momentum of either competitor and carry it on?
Yeah.
And more interesting things.
That definitely can be said about the next one. Number 3.
3.
MJF and Wardlow. So after MJF had turned on Cody, he hired Wardlow, previously seen picking fights in parking lots.
Oh, not picking fights, defending his girlfriend in parking lots.
That's right. Yeah, he was one evidently being picked on. He started throwing dudes around in a parking lot. Yeah. In any event, he was hired as MJF's bodyguard. He was under contract to MJF. Now, this story was really great stuff. Because MJF treated Wardlow kind of like shit. And
not kind of, like absolute.
And you would see the worse it got. Wardlow had like a very Jim from the Office-esque thing going.
Yeah.
Where, somebody would say something and he'd go like this. And so MJF, he would treat him like absolute shit. He put like Sean Spears in charge of him. He'd be very condescending to him. Wardlow would tag along with the Pinnacle because he was at MJF's side all the time. But it created an interesting situation where MJF was like, you don't work for AEW, you work for me. Wardlow took a loss against Cody. In the steel cage match, he took a roll-up loss against CM Punk. And he would be put in these impossible situations with MJF. And then when Wardlow wouldn't be able to get out of him, MJF would run him down, call him an oaf. I remember one time Sean Spears referred to him as like a one-move wonder. And you see Wardlow in the background and the entire time throughout all these feuds, it was like, I don't know, a year or two, throughout all these feuds, people are just waiting.
Yeah.
We all know it's coming.
We all know it's coming.
Waiting for this guy to just lay him out. And that moment, let me ask you this.
Sure.
So the moment that Wardlow finally turned on MJF was, of course, during the dog collar match.
Yeah.
Comes out, and he had been pivotal in helping MJF beat CM Punk in Chicago. This time, after so much abuse, he takes the Dynamite Diamond ring and he just puts it on the apron.
First, MJF calls for him to come out, and so Wardlow comes out. He's patting his suit like he doesn't know where it's at.
I don't know where it's at. Yeah.
And MJF's like, you had one job. And that distraction allows Punk to hit a GTS. And that's when Wardlow puts the ring on the apron and just kind of says, do what you're going to do.
Do what you're going to do. Exactly. So CM Punk knocks him out with that and wins the dog collar match. It's just a spectacular match, but that was a great moment. Now, let me ask you this. In hindsight, the fact that now I think it was probably best, given that we had that MJF Wardlow match and nobody really knew how that was going to go down, but they didn't have Wardlow put his hands on MJF as the turn.
Yeah.
It was clearly, I'm not going to help you this time. I'm out as the turn. Do you think we should have gotten that first moment where he snaps on MJF and turns and physically assaults him?
I think, given how the Double or Nothing match went between MJF and Wardlow, you think, okay, then maybe from Wardlow's perspective, there should have been a more decisive turn on MJF. But if that match at Double or Nothing hadn't gone so paint by numbers, if you will, because MJF's status was seemingly in flux with the company, if we got a more satisfying conclusion to the story, I don't know if we would have had, if you'd be asking that question.
I agree. Yeah, no, I agree totally.
I think the image of Wardlow putting that ring, which is so pivotal to MJF's fortunes so far at AEW, and essentially saying, it's yours if you want it, Punk.
Yeah.
I think that was pretty powerful unto itself.
And to their credit, they filmed that bit perfectly, because when he puts it down, it's a little tiny ring. It's hard to get into focus. They had that camera ready to go. It was in focus. Yeah. So it was really well done.
It was good stuff. So after that, MJF obviously not too happy about Wardlow. Your mind's Wardlow. You're under contract with me. The financial stability of your entire family rests on my shoulders, because I am paying you.
Yeah.
And I am not letting you out of your deal. You are going to fall in line. And eventually that leads to Wardlow doesn't listen. And of course, in typical MJF style, Wardlow has to jump through some hoops to get his match with MJF.
Yeah.
He has to take his lashings. And unlike Cody, who buckled on every single one, Wardlow took his 10, didn't flinch.
That was awesome. I remember watching that and being like, oh, that's a spin on it. He's no-selling the lashes. That's cool.
He took Wardlow's theme away, thinking the crowd wouldn't get excited about his arrival.
Yeah.
No, they started chanting his name. His name was his theme song.
Super creative, yeah.
He made him be handcuffed basically at all times unless he was actively wrestling.
And they had him surrounded by security so he wouldn't attack MJF, but it just made it gave you Goldberg vibes. That was the point.
It really did, between that and the chance of his name.
And the
totally.
chance, yeah.
And eventually he beat Shawn Spears in a cage match when MJF was the special guest ref, and he got his match against MJF. And it's unfortunate that MJF no-showed the meet and greet, and there was all that going on leading into this match, which seemingly was going to be a bit of a coronation for Wardlow in terms of he's the main event guy now.
Yeah,
he was going to beat MJF, and I'm guessing in Tony Khan's eyes, this was the springboard is going to launch Wardlow up into the upper mid card, if not the main event, and we got another top guy. The match didn't go down as planned, and then for whatever reason, they put Wardlow in a lawsuit angle right after this with Mark Sterling. And momentum gone.
It's interesting, though, because, he did give MJF the power bombs. He did pin him. They could have easily salvaged that situation, but the very next night, he says, I don't want to go after the world title. He said, I want to go after the TNT title.
I know.
And it's like, why? What? Like, dude, roll with it. You can find a way to veer him off in a different direction with somebody else. Yeah.
I think we talked about this at the time. So he had I remember if any of his wins while MJF was employing him counted towards the rankings.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I remember we did talk about this.
And so once he was out from MJF's contract, signed with All Elite, his record should have been 0-0.
And we talked about that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And he has to start all over.
and you got to go on like a win streak and build your way back up instead of walking out there and saying, I don't need the world title. I'm going to go after the TNT title instead.
Yeah.
And then, but no, like you said, they had like a lawsuit thing, you know. I forget, that was a Double or Nothing. That's when Punk won, right? Yeah, that's when Punk won. You know, you could have had Wardlow come out, stare down Punk, crowd's going crazy, but with the understanding, hey, I've got a contract with AEW. Did they ever give Wardlow the graphic, the AEW graphic? Okay,
I think so.
If he'd come out and said, I'm starting from the bottom because I'm new here technically with AEW, but I'm coming after that. He looks like a main event guy. He looks like a guy who then is going to step up to that next level. He just needs some time to get there because of circumstance, because of all that. And they didn't even give that thought. They didn't put that thought in our head, because that's also doing a good thing for Punk, because it's like, hey, Punk, you got a lot of guys coming after you now, and this young, hungry, giant man here is going to be one of them. But instead, Mark Sterling was like, "Hey, I'm going to represent all these bodyguards instead."
Yeah, that you powerbombed and
Security
take you to court.
Right,
yeah, way to sap all his momentum.
Yeah, and he hasn't really recovered from then. Yeah, that's an absolute bummer. But the actual story, all that stuff leading up to Double or Nothing, I'm telling you, if they had just continued that momentum even after that paint by numbers match, he could have been a main eventer by now, I think.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Entirely possible.
Let's move on to number 2. MJF versus CM Punk. It was no doubt, no debate, the highlight of CM Punk's AEW run.
Absolutely. I went and found a supercut of basically every segment they did. Some I think they were from the Road to shows, some clips from matches here and there. It was really well put together.
Well, somebody did I think it was a 47-minute one.
Yeah,
it was
really good.
It's got like 2 million. It's called Better Than You, the complete CM Punk versus MJF feud from Outside Interference. It's at like 2 million views.
Yeah, it's really well put together.
Mm-hmm.
It's 47 minutes. It's long, so it takes time commitment. But if you really want to revisit this feud, and this story, that's the place to go, rather than have to find various dynamites all over the place.
Yeah.
And seeing it self-contained in one piece like that, you do have to admire how they structured it. You know, and of course when the feud was initiated because CM Punk interrupted MJF when he was declaring himself the best and said no in the locker room was willing to step up to me.
Yeah.
Out comes Phil. MJF offers his hand. Phil smirks, walks away. And there's so many parallels between CM Punk and MJF.
Yeah.
MJF's catchphrase, "I'm better than you," and you know it. Well, when CM Punk was doing the straight edge thing in Ring of Honor, the culmination of his catchphrase, it was, "I'm better than you."
Yeah.
You know, there's so many details that match up between their careers so well, and they reference those a ton throughout the story in terms of referencing Punk's past in WWE, in Ring of Honor. I mean, the basic crux of this is it starts out, Punk interrupts MJF. MJF drops a promo. That's kind of low-hanging fruit. It kind of kicks off the feud. It leads to the first match in Chicago where MJF got a visual win and an actual win. He essentially beat Punk twice in Chicago.
Yeah.
And then after that match, that's when they really kick it up. And that's when MJF talks about being a massive CM Punk fan. And the day that Punk quit, he drops this promo in Chicago, in Cleveland, the city where Punk walked out on WWE.
Yeah.
And says, the day that you did that, I gave up my dream to be a pro wrestler because I thought if you couldn't make it, there's no chance I could.
Yeah.
And then he says, I went to college and I was looking on Instagram one day, saw a picture of Punk and Bryan Danielson shaking hands. And he says, damn it, now I'm going to go out and I'm going to be the best in spite of you, Punk.
Yeah.
And he's out there pouring his heart out. He's tears coming down his face. And Punk comes to the ring and he doesn't have a mic. He just asks Max, is this true? Is all that true? And MJF walks out. And so the following week, Punk's in the ring. He calls MJF out, and he talks about, every day I wake up and I splash water in my face and I ask myself, am I the hero or the villain of my story? Mm-hmm. And today I answered, well, I'm trying. Mm-hmm. And he didn't apologize for anything, but he did. He said that and then offered his hand. Yeah. To MJF, and MJF didn't shake his hand. He hugged him. Yeah. And then kicked him in the balls.
Yeah. The entirety of that feud, going back to the picture of him as a kid, to have that history right there, it added so much to it. The Ring of Honor, throwback music and attire in the dog collar match. And then, of course, the Wardlow stuff, both in the Chicago, because Wardlow obviously helped MJF win in Chicago. Yeah. And then he helped him lose at Revolution or whatever it was. Uh-huh. It's all, like you said, it was constructed absolutely brilliantly. It really was. It
built to a crescendo, and then it culminated in a really satisfying manner.
Yeah, right. And MJF was, way better off afterwards. I mean, every feud that MJF's been in basically has left him much better. It's a credit to him. It's a credit to the people who work with him, and it's a credit to Tony Khan. Yeah. But this seems very specifically designed to just get him. I mean, to have, claiming 2 wins in Chicago over CM Punk, that's a pretty big deal.
That's a massive deal.
Yeah.
That's a massive deal. Yeah, this in this feud, it really added dimension to MJF's character. To the likes, we hadn't seen prior. And even in early phase of this feud and this story, he was relying on the low-hanging fruit for the promos, and that's something he had done, for a vast majority of his run in AEW. But it seemed like this feud was really the one where, okay, I have a really personal angle I could take with this. Yeah. I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I can go for very pointed, very specific personal attacks now that don't rely on the low-hanging fruit.
And I remember thinking at the time in the very first promo, it was like, wait a second, is he doing this on purpose? Like, is he going for the easy road on purpose? Because and then it seemed like that was the case, because after that, when he went personal and dove into some really interesting character stuff, that it really got interesting. Like, okay, it is the 2 generational promo guys in the ring together,
Because it was that first promo where he just referred to him as PG Punk.
Yeah, it was lame stuff.
I was like, this is kind of a letdown.
Yeah, right, yeah. There were a lot of people just sort of took it at face value. It was like, oh my God, this is great. It's the best thing. But I remember you and I sitting there like, this isn't great. But then the next time around, when he opened up, it got personal. It was like, holy shit, this is really great stuff. And in fact, they sort of reference that what we got that first week was just the surface, it wasn't the real deal. So yeah, interesting stuff. Let's move on to number 1. The Hangman Page road to title. Man, the Hangman Page dude, I know that he's got his detractors, but you and I love him. Yeah. And you cannot deny that his story is one of the more interesting ones getting to that that title.
I mean, it goes all the way back to the introductory press conference of AEW as a company, where he made the claim, I am going to be the first champion. And what did he do? He failed.
He failed. Yeah, he lost.
And it's brought up so much insecurity, so much angst, so much anxiety. He turned to alcohol.
Yeah.
He made an effort to be his own man and get out of the elite. The Young Bucks wouldn't let him.
Yeah.
And then he started the team with Kenny. Kenny coming off his own losing streak, his own run of failure. They find success together, but always seems so tenuous because of Kenny's relationship with the Young Bucks. Those are his best friends.
Yeah.
And gosh, that moment where there's that tournament that FTR eventually won. For Kenny and Hangman's opponents, the night the show they eventually lost the belts, where Page comes out and grabs, I think it's Nick Jackson's foot while he's trying to do a springboard and costs them the match.
Yeah.
And just how you could tell Hangman did so much of Hangman's story is in the subtlety, and he does things and he instantly regrets it.
Right. Yeah.
And that was one of those moments where he did it. It's like, I don't feel good about doing this.
Yeah.
But he felt compelled to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so much subtlety, so many layers.
And like like the gaslighting and manipulation from like Kenny during that entire tag run, where like, you know, FTR, he would drink a beer with them and not with Hangman, and they like ended up like pouring the beer all over his head. It was such good stuff, and it all fed into the insecurities of Hangman Page, which is one of the more interesting characters we have in wrestling. Definitely. Because of the subtleties, because of the internalization of it.
Yeah. I mean, Hangman Page still is just, you know, even after his title win, he's a flawed character.
Yeah.
And that's what I think makes him interesting. He's not a generic babyface. He's not like, you know, a lot of baby faces, especially during Vince's run in WWE. Mm-hmm. You see a baby face like, say, Hulk Hogan. Mm-hmm. You know, take your vitamins and drink your milk and say your prayers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, that's not Hangman Page.
Right.
You know, Hangman is he's got insecurities, he's got anxiety. Mm-hmm. The anxious millennial cowboy. That's what he had a shirt that said that on there. You know, he's not, in terms of the history of wrestling, a prototypical babyface, but I think he is a really good babyface for the era we're in now.
So much of the pro wrestlers, you know, one thing that's always interesting to me in pro sports is the idea of dealing with pressure, with the pressure of being a pro level athlete. Mm-hmm. And Hangman Page takes, you know, pro wrestling, because these are all characters who are essentially being written, they can be whatever they want. 9 times out of 10, one thing they don't do is buckle under pressure. They don't feel the spotlight. They don't feel, you know, the anxiety that comes with success. And Hangman Page is like imposter syndrome. He's all those things wrapped into one, but the one thing he's got is talent.
Yeah.
And to see him navigate this world is really interesting.
It really is. And of course, so we finally, the feud between, so you go back a little bit. So the moment when Hangman and Kenny dropped the belts to FTR, you got that bit where Page is about to collapse, and rather than catching his partner and his friend, Kenny just lets him fall.
Oh man. Yeah.
That was heartbreaking. That was even more heartbreaking than if Kenny had taken the boots to him. Honestly.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. Oh, that was rough. That was rough
just
to
let
watch.
him fall. So then shortly thereafter that, they have an eliminator tournament to determine new number one contender for Mox. Both Page and Kenny are in it. They meet in the finals. Kenny wins. Mm-hmm. A couple weeks later at Winter's Coming, he beats Mox for the belt. So, you know, the story is going to be Page and Kenny at some juncture. Mm-hmm. So, and Kenny has that belt for almost a year. Mm-hmm. So during the summer of 21, there's a 10-man tag match where you have Page and the Dark Order, Kenny and the Bucks. Mm-hmm. And you think, all right, and if Page wins, he gets his title shot. You think, all right, this is going to happen. And he loses again.
Well, they do like a big grandiose entrance too, where he's got the purple on and they all do the thing,
and they all the bandanas and stuff. Yeah. You think this is it. This is his moment. And it's not. Again, the pressure's on, the spotlight's on him. He wilts again.
Yeah.
And he's gone for a while. I mean, it's because his wife had a baby. Mm-hmm. But they worked his leave into the story and had it make sense. Mm-hmm. And so he comes back and wins the casino ladder match and gets his title opportunity at Full Gear 2021. And in a stellar bout, absolutely amazing bout, finally beats Kenny.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's really great stuff. And you can, you know, debate how good or not his title run was. You know, CM Punk enter the picture and seemingly, you know, took the thunder or at least the attention of Tony Khan away from him. And
it's a bummer because Page is one of the most relatable characters in all of wrestling, because, you know, you see the battles that he goes through with himself. Mm-hmm. And regardless of the situation he's in, I think a lot of us see that and think, I've been in that scenario before.
Yeah, right.
I've been in that situation. He just comes across as one of the most human characters there is. He's not perfect.
Right, yeah.
You know, I mentioned Hogan, and obviously behind the scenes, Hogan's far from perfect. And even looking back now, you look at Hogan's run in his prime in WWE, and some of the shit he did, I would describe as being perfect, quote unquote. Yeah. But that's how they portrayed him.
Yeah.
As this upstanding, you know, guy.
Yeah.
Who had near perfect morals. Mm-hmm. That's how they portrayed him in WWE. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, and Hangman's just not that type of character, and I'm happy because I don't that type of character doesn't work these days.
It does. It's just not interesting. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah. And yeah, it would have been a lot more. You know what's funny? What's interesting about his ascent and how long it took is that it's in the fabric of AEW. It's like woven into the genes of AEW. And as soon as he won that title, it was as if he was on an island. It just became, okay, who's next? After that, who's next? After that, it was like CM Punk.
Yeah, but after that.
Yeah, but it was like, it was it was Danielson, Cole, and CM Punk were the major feuds. And it just felt like one after another, and they didn't revisit this idea that this guy had been through a lot in that company, whether it was with the Dark Order or the Elite or whatever. They didn't really like involve him in anything beyond his own, just being on his own island. And he is most interesting when he is, who he is.
And playing off other characters.
Within the entirety of the world of AEW. Yeah. That's when he's most interesting.
And we saw that just recently with, he had been on that island, and now the Dark Order have kind of re-entered the picture. We saw the tension between him and Evil Uno.
Yeah.
And that led to the match with Uno and Mox.
But even him and the rest of the Blackpool Combat Club, how they interact. Yeah, it's Renee. Whenever he's interviewed, it's always got to be with Renee, and he's got that resentment because that's Mox's wife. And so you see all these characters playing off of him, and that works really well. And they didn't do that when he was champion. It was, okay, he's there. Oh, we've got this guy CM Punk over here. We really like him, so I'm going to focus my energy. Same thing with Thunder Rosa. She's champion now. Oh, there's Jade Cargill. We're going to focus on a new title over here. It's always do it and then move on to something else. And this thing that you just spent all this time building is just left alone.
Yeah, I know. It was a bummer that the extent of Hangman's story post winning the title was, all right, now he's going to be essentially put through the ringer with all these physical matches to prove that he could be a champion. And that was essentially it, with nothing more in terms of who Hangman is now as a character after winning the title. You know?
Yeah.
What does that mean for his insecurities? What does that mean for his angst, for his anxieties? Does all that just kind of go away now because he has this belt?
Yeah.
We didn't really get enough of that.
Right. Yeah, there was so much more ground there to cover. Yeah. So anyways, let us know what you guys think in the comments below. What are some of your favorite stories from AEW, past, present, and future? That doesn't make any sense. Let us know what you guys think.
Time travelers in our audience.
Hey, that'd be kind of cool. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. Next week, the worst builds to WrestleMania main events.
2 weeks is next week. No, you're right. Sorry. My bad.
To WrestleMania. Thanks for watching. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Should get my mouth shut. Bye.